This video is how to make a bag using a straight loom. Now, if you get the 4-pack, you get this size, a green and a blue. But for the sake of, I typically make them on this size. This purse and this one was made using this one. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to use the smallest one, which is the little pink one. Now, there's a couple of things you need to think about before you even begin. One is what kind of yarn you're going to use. For this one, it was just a Red Heart brand orange, using one strand and doing different stitches that would make it tight enough. And then, of course, adding the beads. This one was used with a Red Heart brand red yarn and the Fun Fur added into it, and then down to a different brand. So, it kind of gives it a different texture, as you can see on this one. So that's what you have to think about first, is the kind of yarn you're going to use. Second, you got to think about is how big do you want it. If you need to, get yourself a tape measure, ruler, whatever. I just happen to have one of these flimsy ones lying around, because that'll give you a chance to kind of gauge, like from the top of where your loom is, how long you want it to be. I don't typically use them. I eyeball it, but if you are somebody that knows you want the bag to be 12 inches long, then definitely pull out one of these. The second thing you need to figure out is, are you going to add handles like I did on this bag and as I've done on other bags? Or are you going to create a flap like this that opens up into the purse and make a handle like that? So those are the things you have to think about. But when you're ready to begin, we're going to do it as if you're doing the one with the flap. I tend to do that one a lot, because making the ones without, so it just opens up like this, isn't as hard. You're going to do the same idea for the bag, and then you're just going to add the scarves in by sewing them on or whatever later. This is the one that's a little more in-depth, I guess. So the first thing we're going to be doing on the loom is creating the flap. That's going to be the first part. But the whole bag, for the flap and the actual bag part and casting it off, is all done on the loom. The only thing you'll be adding to it later is the handle. So we're going to start with this loom. Now you're thinking, okay, how do I do a flap on here? What you're going to do is you're only going to work on half of the loom. So you're going to cast onto this peg, or whichever peg you're looking at, and you're going to work your way back and forth on one side. So for the sake of this, we'll use some white because I have plenty of that in here. Now again, when it comes to, so I'm just making a slip knot to put it on the loom. And messing up. Okay, so you're going to create your slip knot, and you're going to put it on this outer peg with the yarn obviously going through. Now you have two choices. You can grab both the strand and this and weave them together to hide it into the flap, or if you want, you can leave it dangling down so you know where your starting point was and hide it in later. For the sake of this, I'll hide it in later. Okay, so you have it on your loom, and what you're going to do is you're going to work your way this way to this loom, to this side, sorry. Just E-wrapping it like you would normally wrap a loom. So let me get my yarn where I can reach it. And all we're going to do is we're just going to E-wrap it just like we do any other loom. Okay, I totally messed up how this is working today. Let me try this again. Oh, it's not cooperating today. Okay, so let me put this back on here. Alright, there we go. Wasn't cooperating because of the way I had the yarn going through. Okay, so all we're going to do, if you know how to cast on, that's all you're going to do the first time. You're just wrapping the loom. A little tricky to do backwards, but we're just E-wrapping the loom. That's all we're doing. Okay, oops. It might not be my night for videos. Alright, so we get all the way, we're wrapping it, and we get to this peg and we stop. Since we're doing the flap, we're only working on this side until we get the flap down to where we want it. So that's the other thing you have to think about in terms of how far down do you want the flap? Do you want it to go almost to the end? Do you want it to go halfway? Do you want it to just be a little flap? That's up to you. The method we're going to do, basically you're going to keep doing it until you get the flap the length that you want. So what I did on the orange bag in the beginning is I did a garter stitch, and then I switched it over to, a tighter stitch. But for this So I would say to do the garter first if you can, because it will help with the curling. So we're going to do the garter, which means we're just going to go back through. And we're skipping this peg. We're not rewrapping that. We're going to the next peg to wrap. And you're just going to rewrap it back because you're going to knit this row over. So work your way. So it's a little tricky to do when you're backwards. Okay, so we're just working our way back to the other side again. Okay, so it should look like this. This one only has one, the one you started with, and then each of the other ones should have 2 strands, even 2 strands on this one. Then you're just going to simply use your hook and knit it over. Now this will create a loose stitch. This will be pretty much how this was on the inside of the flap. You will be able to see through it. But it does, like I said, help with the curling. So you could try to use 2 strands to do this method. That would be a good idea too. Again, for the sake of this video, I'm using 1 strand. But what you can do is test it out, see which way you like it, and go from there. So you could do a garter stitch, which is a knit row, then a purl row, a knit row, purl row, for as long as you want to do it, with 1 or 2 strands. So test out both and see which one you like the best. So we're knitting over the final pegs, and again, remember this one only has 1, so we're not knitting that one over. So these are all knitted over, and you kind of give them a little push down. Now, in order to do the garter stitch, when we go back this time, we're going to purl it. So I'm hoping at this point you know how to purl, but if you don't, you're just taking the strand in front of the pegs. Okay, so you got it in front, and you're working your way under. Oops. Not going to cooperate the way I want it to. Okay. You're going to work your way under the 1 strand to reach around and grab the other to make that loop that we talk about. So that's how it's going to look. You're reaching through to make it make a loop, and then take that loop off and place it back on the peg. So you're going to do that for this whole row. Again, I'm going to try to show you if I can. You're going to reach behind this string that you have. You're going to reach and grab that string and bring it up so that it's got the loop, and take that loop off the peg and place it back on it. So that's all you're going to do. That's all it looks like, is you're just going to be purling it, which is that. So go ahead and do that for a row. And that's all I'm doing. It's purling it to make a loop that I can take off. So you reach behind the thread that's the string that's on there to be able to turn it, to twist it to bring up that loop. So I would advise doing this for like 3 or 4 rows, alternating between knitting and purling. And that's all I'm doing right now, is finishing my purl row. Creating that loop, taking it off the peg and putting it back on. Now when you get to the end of here, you're actually going to purl all the way to this peg here. Basically, when you go back and forth, there's always going to be pretty much 1 peg that doesn't have 2 stitches. So you're going to work your way one way where everything will, where you'll miss, this one won't have it, and you'll just purl these. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it right. So I'm finishing out my last couple purls, as I showed you how to do in the beginning. Okay. And like I said, you're going to do this last one at this point. And like I said, decide whether, practice with 1 or 2 strands to decide which way you like it best. And if you do 1 strand, let me show you real quick, like I did, and you decide afterwards, I don't like it, you can simply fold it over and hide it with the same color. So now we did our purl row. Now you're going to go back through and you're going to knit another row. So again, this time, we're going to skip this peg and start wrapping this peg. So you're going to bring your string around, and you're going to wrap this peg, which means this one will not get knitted over. It should only be 1, so let me make sure I got it the right way. A little tricky when you're doing it backwards. So you bring it behind, you're going to knit, you're going to wrap these in order to knit them. So I'm just wrapping them in order to knit them. And this is going to be wrapped all the way to the end. And as you can see, this one only has one, so it doesn't get knitted, and you're going to knit all these rows right to this one. So go ahead and knit them over. Okay, so you're going to go back and forth with this knit purling. Like I said, maybe 4 or 5 rows. It kind of like helps a little bit with the curling and laying it flat. So we're going to now work on the fact that, okay, you already have it, the garter stitch, the knitting purling, as far down as you want, maybe to here, maybe 1 or 2 inches down. Okay, and now you're ready to make the tight stitch like I did on this. Again, this is a tight stitch if you look, and that's what I'm going to show you how to make. But again, you can practice with different yarns, different stitches, to see what you like. But to do this bag, I do what's called, excuse me, a 1/2 stitch. So that's a tighter stitch. So we only have 1 stitch on now. So you're going to wrap this way and wrap back until you get 3 strands on it. But there will be at times where the end ones may only have 2 on it, and that's fine. So this is as if you've done as much gartering, stitching, of knitting and purling rows as you want, and now you're moving on to make more of the heart of the bag. And this is still part of the flap. So we still skip that first one like we've been doing and wrap the others. Just a simple E-wrap. Okay, this one has 2, but you're going to go back through because you want 3 stitches on. This one gets ignored like usual. And you're going to go back through so that you might have to push them down a little bit, so that you have 3 stitches on the main part. And this is a stitch I do until I'm ready to make the full-on bag. Okay, so again, we get to the end, and these all have 3, but the ends only have 2. So you're going to do a regular knit on the end pegs, and then you're going to knit this one over. But on these, because you've got the 3 stitches, you're going to take the bottom stitch up over the top 2. And it's going to create a tighter stitch. So again, you're taking the bottom one, bottom stitch, up over the top 2, and giving it a little push down. The bottom one, over the top 2, the bottom one, over the top 2. So go ahead and do that to the end of this row. It's a little easier for me to do it facing me, so I'm going to finish up this row. And what this is creating is that tighter stitch. So now you have to decide, this is the technique you're going to use until you get the flap as long as you want. And what's good is because you've got 2 stitches on it, you're only going to be wrapping it one time each time around. You're going to wrap it again, you're going to knit the bottom over the top. And again, the end ones will only end up having 2. That's fine, just knit them. Okay. So now let's say that you are already speeded ahead and you've done as much of you want the flap to be. Maybe you're down 4 or 5 inches. So we're going to say that now we're on the part to actually make the heart of the bag. You've already done your flap for as long as you want, doing that tighter stitch. And you are going to keep doing that stitch for the heart of the bag. But now we're getting ready to make it the full bag. And you can keep doing the tight stitch, or you can do a little garter stitch if you want. But when you're ready to make the actual bag, again, I'm already assuming that you've got the flap as far down as you want. When you're ready to do the rest of the pegs, you're going to wrap around the whole loom. This whole loom is going to get wrapped. So you start back the way you came, and you're wrapping it. And you make sure, so when you get to the point where you normally stop, keep wrapping. Okay. Now because you're doing the tighter stitch, as you notice, you got 3 strands. So leave these alone, because you're going to need at least 2 strands to do something with. But this is what it looks like. The whole thing is wrapped, and now, excuse me, you have the ability to still do your 1 knit over, and now you still have the ability to do the 1/3 here. But you're gonna knit this all over. You're not gonna have anything to do on this side right now, because this side only has the 1 stitch. So go ahead and knit the ones that have either the 2 or the 3 strands. When you do the 3 strand ones, you're doing the bottom strand up over the top 2. So that's all I'm doing is in this row, because I've got the 3 strands, is taking that bottom strand up over the top 2. That's all I'm doing right now off camera. Okay. Because eventually you're going to work until you actually have 3 strands on this side. But because you always have 2 on the top, you're still going to be doing your knitting over. I hope I'm explaining that right. So give them a little push down, because it makes it a little easier. Okay, so you're going to go around again, because again, you only have 1 strand on this side. You've got the 2 strands on this side. So you're going back around. Make sure your yarn is loose, because if it gets too tight, it's hard to work with. So now you're just wrapping again, same E-wrap method as you did the other ones, all the way around the loom. Now my nose is itchy. Okay, all the way around the loom, just E-wrapping it. Now, doing this tire stitch enables you to use only 1 strand. That's what I like about it. If you're somebody that doesn't like using 2 strands at once. So you're working your way back to the beginning. Now, as you can see, we have the 3 strands here, but on this side we now have 2. Again, leave this side alone. You're not doing anything with the side yet. You're going to go through and you're going to do your normal knitting over on the ends and knitting over on the front. Leave the back alone. So again, I'm only taking the bottom over the top. Okay, and I'm leaving this side alone. I'm only working on the side that has the 3 stitches. I'm bringing the bottom one over the top 2. Alright, before you get to step, I hope you're watching this before you're doing it. Actually leave these end ones alone. So I actually made a little boo-boo. Leave the ends one with the 2, because that way when you go around this time, they'll all have 3. So I messed up a little bit, but not that much. Just remember that once you get to the point where you want to add the whole bag, or go around the whole loom, the end ones can be left alone until they have 3 strands as well. So now we're on our final go around that will give us the 3 strands we need all the way around the loom. Like I said, I made a mistake on this one, so we're going to pretend that this one does have the extra strand that I accidentally knitted off. So we're treating this as if they all are going to get 3 strands now. So kind of push these down on the side a little bit for you, so you can have room to wrap them. And now just do your E-wrap around so that the whole loom has the 3 strands. And like I said, if you saw my mistake on this one, just pretend for this tutorial that it actually has that extra one on there. So we're just going to re-wrap around. Okay. And this will give all the pegs 3 strands. So like I said, when you're ready to make the bag, ignore knitting the pegs on the very end until they have 3 strands. Okay, so now they all have 3 strands, both sides. So knit over the bottom one over the top one. So you're taking the bottommost strand up over the 2. The bottom strand over the 2. It's a 1 over 2, I like to call it. 1 strand over 2 strands. And this is going to help you create the tighter knit for the bag. But there is another technique you can use. I don't know that I actually did on that bag, and I'll show you as soon as I'm done going around. So like I said, you're just doing the bottommost peg up over the top 2. Or bottommost strand, sorry. things don't like to cooperate. I did that. I did think I have the yarn a little tight, so really be careful of that, because if you're tight one time you go around, when you go around again the next time, you'll actually feel that tension and it makes it a little tricky. Okay. I'm working on the other side now, doing the 1/2 stitch. All I'm doing is what I showed you before, taking the bottommost strand up over the top two. Now there was another stitch that I decided to do about, I don't know, about halfway down the bag, and I'll show you what that is in a second. And you can decide which stitch you'd want to do. Because basically now you're making sure the pegs are wrapped with as many times as you need to do whatever stitch you're going to do. Now that is, like I said, the one that will create this tight stitch that you see here. But if you want to mix it up, I don't know if you can actually tell the difference on here, but here's that tighter stitch, and then I go into a little bit of a more chunkier stitch down here. Like I said, I'm not sure if you can tell the difference between this part and this part if you look really close. And what I did here is I actually had, 4 strands on all the pegs, and I took the bottom 3 over the top 1. So it was a 3, over 1 stitch versus a 1/2 stitch. But I would suggest, if this is your first time making a bag, stick with the same stitch throughout after you do the garter stitching for the flap, and that way it'll give you practice, and then experiment with different stitches. So like I said, you're going to keep going around until this is as long as you want it. Like I said, this is going, you've already made the flap as long as you want, now you're working the bag for as long as you want the bag to be. And that I have no say over. So, you've gotten the bag to the point where you're like, okay, I'm getting to the end, how do I take this bag off? The first thing you want to make sure you do to make it easier is that you only have 1 strand on the pegs. So if you've been doing the stitch we've been doing all along, taking the bottom strand up over the top 2, go around one more time so you have 3 strands on. So we're going to do that. Make sure you have 3 strands on. This is the last time you're going to be wrapping this peg. Okay, so you got the peg wrapped the last time around. You're getting ready to cast this off, and you're trying to figure out how to do it. You've made the flap, you've made the bag as long as you want it. Now you're ready to take this off. The first thing you have to do is you go back one more time, so there's 3 strands. This time, take the bottom 2 up over the top 1, because you only need 1 strand left on the peg. So take the bottom 2 off, so you're only left with 1 loop on there, because you're getting ready to cast this off. Of course it's going to fight me, but that's all I'm doing, is so that I'm getting myself left with 1 strand on there, because that's going to be easier to work with. And if you made your stitches tight, you're going to be able to tell at this point. But like I said, this is the ending of it. You've got all the components the way you want them. Like I said, that's all I'm doing, is so that I can have 1 peg or 1 strand left on the pegs. And you can kind of push them. You don't necessarily need to push them down, because you're going to be doing something to them in a minute. Okay. So just want 1 strand left on. And the way you're actually going to end up taking this off is very similar to, I believe, how I did the casting off for a blanket. But you're doing this one little technique first that will save you a little bit of time. I do not sew these together. I pretty much attach them, these sides together, to close off this. Because when this is coming through the loom, it's coming backwards upside down. Your flap is already, it's like this. That's how it's going to look when you get it ready. You're going to have your flap, you're going to have your bag, and then you're going to get ready to cast off. I'm trying to talk slower, but I don't know if it's working. Okay. One more here. Alright, so now all your pegs, go through and make sure all the pegs only have the one. And this yarn's a little tricky because it's a little older yarn, so it wants to split on me. Okay, so now you've got just one strand on all the pegs, both sides. So now you're going to do what I call the way to kind of close this off. Basically, you're going to take, excuse me, this, let me see, oh, I guess I gotta go back around here. Hang on, I missed a couple, because you want to be back at your starting peg again. So I missed wrapping a couple, so that's why it looked weird to me. Alright, so you got the one strand, you got your yarn back at the beginning. Working on the side that doesn't have your working yarn. The side has your working yarn, go on this side. You're going to take, excuse me, this peg, lift it off and put it on this peg. Or even that peg. It doesn't matter which one of these you put it on. Just take this loop and put it on one of these pegs. Okay, so I put on that one, and then you're going to knit it over. Okay, now you leave this one alone. We're working our way from this way to that way. Now you're going to take this peg, or whichever peg you didn't put that loop on, and bring it over. And then bring the next peg over. Then bring the next peg over. Okay, so you're just going to bring them over to join them together. I like this step because it saves me some knitting. Or sewing, sorry. If it's a little tight, you can just work it so you can get on. If you have to twist the yarn back around, if it's decided to curl on you. And it might be a little tough depending on how you did the stitches. That's the thing I'm running into right now. And also I'm holding this a different way than I normally would do it, so. Alright, let's make sure you get out the whole loop. And then place it on the peg. Oh, why is it being so stubborn? Okay, so like I said, I'm taking a couple over and I've got them like this. You can, at this point, as you're going along and moving them one over, you can knit it over. And this is what's helping to close the bag. Okay, so that's all you're going to do. And like I said, because it's kind of tight, you're just bringing it over to go on the peg that's across from it. It's a little tricky to do showing it up to the camera. That's all I'm doing. Is I'm lifting off the peg on this side, the loop, and putting it on the peg across from it, so that I have the two strands on one side. And that's what this bag is. It's basically, you do the flap first to the length that you want it, then you start adding the bag, going all the way around to add the bag to as long as you want it, and then you do this part, which will help you to close the bag off on here. And it can be a little time consuming. Okay. Alright. And the next technique is basically similar, like I said, to taking off a flat panel. And that's at least what I use for it. I try to do as much on the loom as I can. And sometimes you have to be careful, if you pull too hard, your peg will come off. Which gets a little annoying. I'm hoping it doesn't do that with the new loom I just got. Okay, so again, try to make sure, because I can tell that some of it is the fact that I might have wrapped them a little too tight. So it's being a little stubborn. That's why you might have to set it down like I had to do to get this one to come over where I need it. Usually does not fight me this much. So all I'm doing right now is just fighting to get this other loop on the other side. It's usually not this hard, but like I said, I believe I might have wrapped them a little too tight. So really, especially towards the end, be a little careful of how tight you wrap them, as I said, because the last thing you want to do is be close to being done, and then this technique that usually isn't that bad is taking me a little longer. That's all I'm doing is see, as you can see, if this was a bag, it's just closing it off. And you'll see that in a minute when I get done, how it closed it off. Even though it's not really a bag. But again, it's a really cool idea. And there's so many different sizes of looms. So you got plenty of choices of what size you want to do something. I made little bags before for a kid that wanted to put his Bible books in it. Because he goes to a church and they give him, you know, almost like Monopoly money or whatever. So I made him a little bag to put that in. Okay, we're getting close to the end stitch now. Okay, so now we're getting to the point where now all we have left is these three here. Excuse me. You're going to take, instead of putting this one in first, you take this one and bring it over here. Because you want your working yarn to be on top. I mean, this is going to look a little weirder, just for the sake of the simple reason that it would normally be bigger. And then you take that last loop and bring it over. Okay, so now you have your working yarn on top. This would normally be going down. You'd have your bag as long as you want it here. Now to take it actually off the loop, you might need this if they're tight to take the loop off, but you're going to need a crochet hook, just like we did with the casting off of the flat panel. So make sure you get yourself some extra yarn. And I just totally rolled that ball of yarn off my bed. Okay, so what you're gonna do is just like the casting off video, you're gonna pick up this loop where your working yarn is. Okay, and you're gonna make your loops like we did before. So you're gonna make 1, 2, I believe I made 3 on that one. 2, oops, things are not cooperating today. Make your second loop. Okay, and you're gonna make your third loop, which is basically bringing that around. And, okay, so you got your third loop. Okay, and then you're just gonna go down and grab the second loop and put that on there. Okay, so there you go. You're just going to take that loop off and put it on there and bring that one through. And then you're going to go back to making your loops. So you got your 1, 2, and this is going to be different because you're probably going to be doing this on your lap. 3, so we got our 3 loops. And then pick up the loop off the next peg, so you have both on there. And then bring the back one over the top one. And then make your 3 loops again. I mean, I know you can't see what I'm doing, but I just showed you a minute ago how to do the loops. So you get your 3 loops on there. Pick up that next peg. So you got the 2 on there. And then pull the bottom, or the back peg over the top. And then make your loops again. So it's a little tricky to show how to do loops. So yeah, you wrap the crochet hook and then pull it back through the loop you have. Wrap the crochet hook and pull it back through so you have your loops. And then grab the next peg. So that's all I'm going to do to get close to the end, and then I'll show you how to do it from there. So just make your loops. I mean, try to get them as uniform as you can. I know it's a little tricky. I mean, mine aren't going to look the greatest because I'm holding it up different. But just try not to do like really big loops and then small loops. I mean, try to keep them about the same size. That's all I'm doing is doing my 3 loops in between, and you may decide you need more or less. So it's basically what looks good to you. Okay. Just got a couple more pegs to take off, doing the same method I was just showing you on camera. Okay. All you're doing is making your 3 loops and then grabbing the next peg loop off the peg. Sometimes it may fight you trying to get through. Just be patient. Okay. And this really usually doesn't take that long. It all depends on how tight you have the stitches and how many loops you choose to do in between and all that stuff. And the more you do it, for doing the hooks, crochet hooking and all that, the faster you'll get. I still don't crochet though. My looping of crochet is basically using it on the loom. Okay. Now you're getting, I'm on 2 more pegs to go before I'm on the end. So in a little bit, I'm going to cut off an extra strand of yarn. Okay, because I'm going to show you now, I've done that same technique all the way across, and I only have these 2 pegs left. So I'm taking that one off, pulling the back over the top, and now I'm getting ready for the last one. At this point, you can cut yourself some extra yarn off, because you don't need that much. Now you're going to do your last time of doing the 3 loops before you get that last peg off. Okay, and then you're going to grab that last peg off, put it on the crochet hook, bring the back through the top, and then all you're going to do is you should be able to pull it through where you don't need this anymore. And then you do one loop where you can bring that tail you just cut off through the project and give it a little tug. Now, if this was a real bag, there would be our flap, our opening. I mean, it's hard to tell here, but it would be a flap, and it would be done. Now, the last thing you might want to do on that string before you cut out the tail is I usually just make like a little knot at the end. Try not to make it too huge. You don't want people to notice it. I do that sometimes, and then you can weave it back in the project a little bit, or I usually just end up snipping it off, and then nobody sees it. But that's just the different parts. I know it looks nothing like this. It would take a while to actually show you all these parts. And then, excuse me, so that's how you actually make the bag. Now when you want to make the handles, you can use the flower loom, the scarf loom, and use the skinnier side and just knit around that, as you see me do for a tube scarf in the video. Or you can do an I-cord stitch, which I'm not sure if you know how to do. I can show that later. Or you can find a handle that you can add. But basically, you're going to want another cord made somehow. Even if you only use a couple pegs and you just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until you get it as long as you want it. Keep in mind, yarn stretches, and as I said, I probably will shorten this one up to compensate because it is pretty stretchy. But I hope I explained it. I tried to talk slower. Sometimes it's really hard to show all of what you do on a camera because you're looking at the camera and not looking down at your project. But that is basically the components of a bag. And then the handle, like I said, can be, you could even like braid some yarn if you wanted and tie that on as a handle if you don't want to use the loom to do something. The handle is pretty much whatever you want it to be. You can go out and decide to buy a handle. You can strap onto it. You could buy, maybe a ribbon that you'd rather have and attach that to it. It's whatever you want the handle to be. So, I hope you enjoyed this video and have a great day, everyone.